welcome to the final turn of 1943. These were the two cards that were in play. The German one came in very handy for them. One, because it allowed them to strengthen their front lines before the Allies got to move, because they won initiative, obviously, by having the higher number. And despite the fact that their factories and resources have seriously dwindled by now, they got 3 extra steps to add to their totals, which was very handy. As for the Allies, the Russians benefited from the card as well, but the British and the US, well, they had so many production points that they didn't even need the extra ones, assuming, and I do believe that to be the case, that the standard rules still apply. For instance, that you cannot add steps to units at sea, for instance, when it comes to naval units. And since many of them are in fact at sea, as you can see, and also here in the Mediterranean, well, those units couldn't be upgraded, so they didn't need that many points. As for the Russians, as the White Sea is frozen, for instance, US Lend-Lease to the Russians cannot reach the port of Murmansk, so those 3 PPs couldn't be shipped to the Russians, but I looked it up. Since they do control Iran, one of those Lend-Lease PPs can arrive to the Russians, which it did. So the Russians did use most of their PPs. As for combats, the Russians attacked the Carpathians yet again. They didn't really expect to take it, but because the Germans reinforced it, but well, not reinforced in the sense of the game rules, but they strengthened it by adding additional units to it. Obviously, the Russians have lots of PPs and they don't need to worry about any losses. They can simply rebuild them, and that's a completely different story for the Germans. So it's just a matter of literally a war of attrition. And sooner or later, I assume they will break through. Now, the Allies finally attacked Sicily. That was an interesting battle. I believe they even needed an extra leader step for an extra round. Or perhaps that was in the Blitz battle, in the subsequent battle for Naples. As you can see, the Italians are still there, even though the air unit that supported the attack managed in one roll to reduce the Italian infantry there from 4 to 1. On the next round, which did require an extension because attacking across the strait is a 1-round battle. Anyway, because naval units and shore bombarding units and aircraft cannot eliminate the final step of an army, it came down to the British land units, meaning well, tank unit. Keep in mind there's a tank on the silhouette, but it's still an infantry unit, as the rules clearly stipulate, along with their leader, but they failed to take out the final step. Well, that was all good and well for the Axis, because the rules for Italian surrender say that if all of Africa is controlled by the Allies, along with at least one area adjacent to Rome, the Italian forces surrender, which would mean that they would all be removed from the board, but all other areas in Italy not controlled by the Axis, in this case the Germans, or perhaps Romanians or whatever, who you could theoretically also move in, would, all vacant areas, if you will, would also automatically revert to Allied control. And, well, that would be, well, not very handy for the Germans either. So that's basically what happened on this turn. Very, very interesting one, I have to admit. Yeah, let's see what 1944 brings.